Spoiling all the Paranormal Activity movies, and we're on the 6th one, almost at the end, let's do it. Paranormal Activity 6, The Ghost Dimension, opens up with a flashback to the 3rd movie. So we're reminded about how Dennis is killed, and then Grandma Lois brings Katie and Christy up the stairs, and we see where she brings them. She brings them to this man who talks to them about how important Toby is. He tells them how Christy is going to birth a son who is going to be one of the chosen, and Katie, you will need to take care of your sister and a lot of others. And there's another special girl out there just like you guys, and he, talking about Toby, is going to bring her to us. So mind you, this took place in 1988, and then we cut to 2013 where we meet a new family. So we have this kid Leela and her father Ryan, her mom Emily, her aunt Skylar, and her uncle Mike, who's Ryan's brother that's staying with them. So one day they're decorating for Christmas, and Ryan finds this box with this old-ass camera that looks like it's from the 80s in it and all these VHS tapes. And we recognize the VHS tapes as the one from the 3rd movie, so they're of Katie and Christy as kids. So Ryan starts filming with this camera and immediately notices that it catches some weird shit. So like he's filming in the living room and he sees this like movement that kind of looks like a figure, but he can only see it through the camera. And they decide that this camera and all the VHS tapes must belong to the people that used to live here. Now, upon finding this camera, Leela immediately starts to act like a little fucking weirdo, like kids tend to do in this franchise. Ryan hears her talking to herself in her room one day and goes in and asks who she's talking to, and she says, "My friend." So Ryan and Mike start to look through the footage of the VHS tapes, and they're labeled from 1988 to 1992. So we see some footage that we recognize from the 3rd movie of the girl's mom and Dennis. And then they start to see some tapes with the girls as kids with this guy that we saw in the beginning. And in one video, he's telling Christy, like, close your eyes and let him show you. And it's almost like he's hypnotizing her. And Christy starts to say, like, okay, I see a pink room with a pink tent in it and butterflies. And Ryan notices that she's describing Leela's room. Ryan continues to film around the house with this camera and is picking up weird shit, like there's like particles flying through the air that you can only see through the camera. He tells Skylar about it and she's like, well, sometimes these cameras can pick up like different planes of existence. One day Skylar and Mike are home with Leela and they're filming outside and they catch this like shadow in the bushes. When they go to investigate it further, they find Leela in the dark in the bushes and they discover that she's burying a rosary, which is her mother's. So the next day, Ryan is talking to Leela about it to be like, why did you do this? And Leela just says, I don't want to talk about him. But she won't tell him who she means. That night, Ryan's watching more footage when he hears something coming from upstairs and he finds Leela in the dark in the bathroom. And she is smearing blood on the window and just speaking in gibberish. The next day, when he's watching the footage, he plays it in reverse and discovers that she is saying Bloody Mary. And the next day, Ryan and Mike discover a carving out back that says Katie and Christy 1987. So now Ryan puts together that this was their house where they filmed all that weird shit on the VHS tapes. They do some more digging and discover that the house burned down in 1992, which we know about the house burning down from the earlier movies. And no bodies were recovered, but the whole family disappeared, including Katie and Christy. So Ryan tries to tell Emily, like, our house was built on top of theirs and weird shit is happening to us too, and of course she doesn't fucking believe him. But she ultimately agrees to let him set up cameras in the house to see if he can catch anything. So he does that, and on night 1, he captures this, like, black mist coming out from underneath Leela's bed while she sleeps and forming this figure. And Leela, like, wakes up and starts talking to it. So the next day, Ryan sees this footage and asks Leela who she was talking to, and she says Toby. The next night, Ryan's filming in the house, and he once again sees these, like, black particles flying through the air near Leela's room. And when he goes in there, he straight up catches this, like, demonic figure that just lunges at the camera. They rewatch the footage the next day, and Ryan's like, whatever this thing is, it's telling her to do things. The next night, the camera catches Leela waking up and following this, like, black form into the living room. And we see her ripping pages out of a book and throwing them in the fireplace. Her mom comes down and brings her back to bed before she can actually turn the fireplace on. But the next day, Emily discovers that the book that she was ripping pages out of and was trying to burn was Emily's fucking Bible. Emily also witnesses the fireplace turn itself on, the angel fall from the top of the tree, and this all finally causes her to be like, okay, Ryan, I think you're right, something's in the house. So Ryan continues to look at the footage and realizes that it starts in 1988, the girls are living with their mom and her boyfriend, but then all of a sudden it jumps and everything is totally different. And all the later footage is of the girls with this guy and this other woman that they call Mom, and this guy seems to be like their leader who's preparing them for something. Another night, Ryan is once again watching these tapes and Mike walks in on him, and it's another one of these sessions where one of the girls seems to be being hypnotized by this guy, but instead of describing Leela's room, she starts describing the room that Ryan and Mike are in. As she's doing that, Leela walks in. Ryan goes to pick up Leela and bring her back to bed, and Leela sneezes. And Christy on the fucking tape says, bless you. Which again, this was in 1988. So now obviously everybody is freaking out and is like, it's like they can see us even though this is 20 years ago. Another day, Leela's in her room by herself and once again is talking to something. And she's saying things like, there's a door, all I have to do is draw it. And all of a sudden she starts drawing all these symbols on her bedroom wall in the shape of a door. So Ryan and Emily obviously see this and Ryan recognizes the symbols. He recognizes it from the tapes that he's been watching and he also knows that that is the sign of the midwives, which is a coven that dates back to the Middle Ages. And they would use symbols like that to open doors to different times and places. Leela continues to act weirder and fucking weirder. One day, Ryan and Emily go in her room and find her playing the recorder in the middle of the night. They go to put her to bed, but then they're attacked by this shadow mist thing again. And the next day, we see Emily on the phone trying to call different priests. She's trying to talk to Leela about what happened, and Leela is just not responding. But Leela just looks at Emily and says, he's gonna take me away, but won't say who she means. Emily asks, where is he going to take you? And Leela says, to be with the others. So a priest arrives at the house and Ryan starts showing him all the footage. He shows them footage of the girls playing Bloody Mary, which we saw in the third movie. And Ryan says, like, I think Leela might have learned this from them because how else would she have known what Bloody Mary was when she was in the mirror? So the priest says that it sounds like Leela is being stalked by a demon, which obviously makes everybody flip out. Emily's saying that they should leave the house. And the priest is like, a demon attaches itself to a person, leaving won't matter. So they go in Leela's room and they see that she has drawn the name Hunter in chalk on her chalkboard. The priest starts to bless Leela with holy water and she literally lunges at him and attacks him. So Ryan now starts to look more into how they bought this house. He finds the business card from their realtor whose name was Katie Hubbard, but when he calls the realty company, nobody's ever heard of her and they have no record of her ever working there. So he starts to believe that somebody purposely planted them in this house. We continue to see these black shadow figures everywhere, and one night one of them attacks Mike. So Mike and Ryan go to the police station the next day and they find some information. They find a missing poster for Hunter Ray, who was born on June 6, 2005, which is the same exact day that Leela was born. And they discover that Katie is his aunt who killed his parents and is suspected of killing a family in Nevada. Talking about the family from the fourth movie. Ryan sees the missing poster and is like, I recognize this kid. And he plays a video from 1992 and Hunter is in it. And he's like, they have the same birthday. What if this is where Toby is going to take Leela? And then that night, as Leela's sleeping, everything starts shaking and her wall cracks open and reveals this portal. And she goes into it and the next morning they can't find her. Eventually they find her lying in her bed and she tells Ryan, I'm going to set him free. So this finally causes everybody to get up and leave the fucking house. Skylar and Mike go back to pack some things where they discover this like drawing of a goat that Leela did. And they recognize it from one of the books that Ryan had. And in the passage where this drawing is, it says that the Prince of Darkness will be ushered in by the blood of two born on the same moon, meaning Leela and Hunter. So they put together that this coven of witches is trying to do a ritual that will give Toby, aka this demon, a human body. Leela then somehow ends up back in the house, which nobody fucking knows how, but she's there and like trying to get back through the portal. So they call the priest to come back and he decides that they have to do an extermination. So they draw this symbol in the middle of the room and they use Leela as bait. But before they can finish the ritual, the priest is dragged away and killed by the spirit. The rest of them finish the prayer and use this sheet that's been soaked in holy water to trap the demon in this symbol. And they think it worked. It's over. Just fucking kidding, because Skylar all of a sudden starts choking and vomits up this like black bile, which then lands on Mike and burns him to death. Both of them die. Ryan, Emily, and Leela run up to Leela's room, but Ryan is killed on the way because this hand just bursts through his chest and he fucking dies. And then this little bitch just runs into the fucking portal. So Emily goes in to follow her, and when she comes out, we're in the house from the third movie. She runs around looking for Leela and ultimately she finds her looking like this. And she says, it's okay, mommy, they only needed a drop of my blood. We see these feet come into the camera and it approaches Emily and attacks her and kills her. And then Leela comes back in frame, looks up at this mysterious figure and says, hi, Toby, and takes his hand and they walk off and the movie ends.
Something The actual story behind Coraline.
Oh, it's based on real?
With the button eyes, the doll,
Yeah.
that's all real. In New Hampshire, there was a grandma and a little girl. The grandma was taking care of the little girl because the girl's parents died in a fire. The whole house that they were living in got burned down. The little girl got rescued miraculously by the grandma. There was rumors going around the town that the grandma did witchcraft.
Interesting.
So when she was taking care of her, she didn't let her go outside. Everybody referred to the grandma as like a bad parent. Why aren't you letting your kids have fun? She said, you're not allowed to talk to no one, right? So there's these two kids that went into the house, that explored the house because they were like, where is this kid? So when they look around, they see kids' clothes everywhere. They go into the girl's room. It's a burnt
There's this one song that played by accident. Played so by accident. It's by Billy Joel, some old,
What
you know?
I know Billy Joel.
Yeah,
I've
like
been listening to Vienna a lot. Is it that?
that's the song.
Literally before I came here.
Wait, that's actually the song.
Yes, I promise. I literally. That's
What
so
the
weird.
That's
Wait, so tell the scenario. What happened in the scenario?
wild. That's actually the song, Sasha.
Yeah, I've been listening.
That's
to that
crazy.
song.
Okay, so no, because I've been going through a thing of I've been feeling really, really as if I'm going too fast for myself and I can't do everything.
Yeah.
You know? But I want to. No matter what, I'm gonna try to. That song, if you listen to the lyrics, it's saying, okay, just listen to like the first bar. That's crazy. You're listening to that too?
I swear.
What the
I
fuck?
swear.
Listen to the lyrics too.
Where's the fire? What's the hurry about? You better cool it off before you burn it out.
Oh.
Fam, this song played when I was so exhausted.
Where?
I was
Where?
dead in my room.
Oh, okay, just
Like,
random.
no, I was
my room.
This is what happened. I put in my headphones and lied on my bed because I was so tired and I needed something to chill me out because I was too overstimulated, too many things on my mind. I put it on like shuffle for a random song, and this song played out of nowhere,
That's God.
and it hit me. I'm like, yo, it's a legend, but it's not even a legend. This is dead ass a person.
Yeah.
They call it the Catman of Grenwick.
Catman of Grenwick. Never heard that.
Never heard of it?
Where's Grenwick?
I think it's in Scotland.
Okay, yeah, I was gonna say that sounds like a Scott.
I think it's Grenwick, something like that.
Greenwich?
But they call it the Catman, and this is a real. This is dead ass a real person.
Okay, okay.
It seems like an urban legend, but there's many people that take pictures of it.
Word.
So, what the story is pretty much this guy. What you see in the pics, fam, is literally a man covered like in dirt, but he only crawls on his legs and he eats rats, pretty much.
Oh wait, I have heard of this.
You heard of this?
And he went around and started eating it, all the cats?
Yeah. He goes
Okay.
around like eating, like
I seen the picture.
mice,
Yeah,
mouse, all
I
of that
seen
shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, what happened? Do you know the story? Like the origin?
No, I don't know the story.
So there's many stories like legends, but this is the most valid one.
Okay.
People said one time, I think he was just honestly just like a random stranger, but he got jumped.
Oh shit.
But he got jumped so bad
Yeah.
that like his brain got messed up in a way that it put him into survival instincts of an animal. So the most basic survival instincts that are get food, move,
Yeah.
drink water, survive. And from then on, I think he was paralyzed from like his hips down. This is dead as a real person. Like it's not even just a folklore.
Yeah.
To this day, I don't know if he's still alive, but around 2007, when the first sightings happened, there's so many pics, fam. Like
Really?
he's just walking, not even crawling around, almost like a Black Ops 2 zombie, going around and just eating rats and walking around. And he can't stand. He's not like a human. And it's almost, you know, the movie Tusk,
Yeah,
where
yeah.
he loses the
no.
sense of being a human. He can only react as like he's a cat or like an animal.
So what
He can
happened
just
to
make
him?
noises and he can just survive. That's all he can do.
So what happened to him? Did they catch him or like it was just
There's
they let
there's nothing to catch. Like,
Yeah.
fam, you can't really. What are you gonna do to him? He's not really breaking no crimes.
I don't care what anybody says about these. These are my guilty pleasure horror movies. Let's do it. The Gallows 2 opens up with this group of friends doing the quote-unquote Charlie challenge. So the whole point of this game is you read a passage from the Gallows play, which is supposedly cursed due to the fact that Charlie Grimmel died in it years prior. That's the whole premise from the first movie. The spoiler is connected here. That's where this comment was left. One of the friends there doing this challenge is this girl named Lex. So Victor here reads a passage from the Gallows, and not long after, he and his friends are killed by the Hangman. Which he, of course, is the killer that we saw from the first movie who gave us this really cheap jump scare. So fast forward, we meet our main character, Anna. She is living with her older sister and she's attending this high school that has like this prestigious drama program. So she's attending in hopes of getting into college for drama. So her first day of school, she's feeling super confident, but she goes up to perform a monologue during an acting class and just completely butchers it and makes a fool out of herself. Anna ends up meeting this boy, Cade, that she has a crush on. He kind of like walks her through it, like, oh, it wasn't that bad. So at the same time, while at home, Anna is trying to make a YouTube channel, but it's really not taking off. But one day, this person with the username AlmostFamous99 starts contacting her. And this person sends Anna the link of the video of Victor and friends doing the Charlie challenge and being killed by it. So Anna is like, okay, this is what can make me famous, and this is also what I can do in acting class to stand out. And sure enough, she goes to her school library and finds a copy of The Gallows. So Anna kind of becomes obsessed with this play, and she decides to do the Charlie challenge and read a passage from it, and she records it and puts it on YouTube, and the video goes viral. A little bit later on, Anna redeems herself by performing a monologue from The Gallows in her acting class, and she completely blows everyone away. So she's on fucking cloud nine. She's getting praise in her acting class, her video is going viral, but one of the viewers noticed that while she did the Charlie challenge, one of her tables in the background moved by itself. So because of the popularity the video is getting, Anna decides to read another passage and film it again. But this time, while she's reading and recording it, something flies across her bedroom on its own. Anna thinks it's all fun and games. She's like, this is gonna get me great views. Meanwhile, her relationship with Cade is budding. They go out on a date. He introduces her to her parents, who happen to be famous actors. But one night when they're out, Anna gets startled when she looks in the rearview mirror of his car and sees a hangman-looking figure on the street. And a little bit later on, she gets another message from that Almost Famous 99 person who directs her to this Charlie challenge fan page. So she's looking through, and that's when she learns about Charlie Grimmel. She had no idea about this guy and that he died during the actual Gallows production years prior. And she's watching all these other videos of people who have done the Charlie challenge and have since experienced all this paranormal activity or have since died. And she once again sees the silhouette of the hangman, this time in her house. So Anna's getting increasingly more disturbed, and one night she's at a party with Cade and she has a vision of him being killed by the hangman. She comes to and realizes he is still very much alive, but it's enough to rattle her and want to make her give up all this gallows shit. So the next day she goes to school and tells her drama teacher, I'm done with the gallows, I'm not going to recite that monologue anymore, I'm going to recite something else. But she goes up on stage with the intention of reciting something else, but the gallows monologue comes out. Meanwhile, this almost famous person continues to message Anna, and at this point she blocks them completely. But eventually she also finds videos of this girl Lex, who was part of the group that did the Charlie challenge with Victor. Lex reveals that she has this mark on her neck as if she's been hanged that just continues to get worse and worse. Meanwhile, Lisa, Anna's sister, has noticed her increasingly bizarre behavior, and one night she finds a rope which leads her to a tree outside where she finds her dog hanging. I'm so sorry. So at this point she blames Anna for it, because who the fuck else would have done this? Anna at this point is watching Lex on a live stream, and it seems like she is going to hang herself. Anna tries to intervene unsuccessfully, and the hangman appears behind Lex and presumably kills her. A little bit later on, Lisa is in the house alone one day trying to pack for a show that she has, and the hangman shows up and offs her too. So at this point, Anna has made Cade aware of this whole thing, and he fully believes her. And he starts researching deaths that took place at Beatrice High School, which is the high school where the first Gallows takes place, where the Gallows play was performed, where Charlie Grimmel died. And he reads this article about how by invoking Charlie's name, it summons the hangman character that he was supposed to play in the play The Gallows. And he also reads about Pfeiffer, who we know from the first movie is the daughter of Charlie. Kate discovers that she and her mother are both committed to a psychiatric hospital not far away. So Kate and Anna go to see Pfeiffer in hopes that she can tell them how to defeat the hangman, but she tells them the only way to defeat him is to offer a willing sacrifice. As Kate and Anna go to leave the hospital feeling defeated, they are abducted by unseen figures. And when they wake up, they're on gallows with nooses around their neck. At this point, the hangman shows up and he tells the two of them that they must pick one of them to be sacrificed. Before Anna can say or do anything, Cade volunteers to be sacrificed and the door opens beneath him and he is hanged. She sees this and cries and begs to offer her life in place of Cade's. She will die for him. And the trap door opens up beneath her and she is hanged as well. But it's at this moment, once Anna is dead, that this group of people appear. These people include Lex and Victor and Cade's parents. And it's revealed that Cade is very much alive and is attached to a harness and just faked his death. And it's also revealed that he is the one that is Almost Famous 99. And it turns out this was a huge conspiracy that everyone was in on to achieve the perfect Charlie challenge, and the movie ends.
You know that kid that went viral for his before and after pics because everyone thought he got cloned?
Yeah.
He's 3 years old. Riker Rep. He was in his backyard playing with his dog and then he got lost for 2 days.
Yeah.
And imagine you're 3 years old, you get lost in the forest, surviving 2 days is GG's. So they sent the whole search team. They found him, but he was 2 miles from originally where he was.
Oh, word?
When they found him, he was wearing different clothes. They found him in a shed.
Why does he look like that now?
This is when he just found him and this is when
Okay,
he
that
got
makes
lost.
sense though. Bro was in the wilderness. He's probably raised by the wolves.
2 days without water or food. Like, you're 3 years old. You're not going hunting.
We see Tarzan.
Oh, bro.
In my head, that's why I would believe it. But the conspiracy, definitely, that's not him.
Yeah, it's not him. He found it with different clothes. How do you explain that? In my mind, there's no way this kid survived.
This is part 2 on the abduction of Sarah Payne. So Lee and the rest of his siblings run back to their grandparents' house and they inform their grandma that they can't find Sarah anywhere. Police arrive at the scene and they begin mapping out the area trying to figure out where she could have gone to. They start off by making a list of all the known sex offenders in the area to see if maybe they had something to do with this. They start going through the list and one man in particular stood out. This was 41-year-old Roy Whiting. Now, Roy had spent 2 years in prison for the abduction of a 9-year-old little girl who he abducted while she was outside playing with her friends. He took her to an isolated area, essayed her, and then he let her go. Because he confessed to this, he was only sentenced to 2 years, and after the 2 years, he left his hometown and moved to where Sarah's grandparents lived to have a fresh start. It's truly disturbing to know that this man only got 2 years for abducting a little girl and doing these brutal things to her, and then was just able to move to this new town near other children without anybody knowing that he had this criminal record. So the police go question Roy, but he denies everything. He says he has no idea who Sarah is, and he says that he wasn't even in town when Sarah disappeared. He's just not really cooperating with police, and since they didn't really have any hard evidence against him, police had to let him go. However, they did stay behind and they kind of just spied on him. They wanted to follow him around and see if he did anything suspicious, and he did. He ended up approaching a white van that matched the same description as the van that Lee described, and he began cleaning out the van and just like rummaging through it. Police were like, okay, this is weird, and they decided to just confront Roy in that moment, and they ended up finding a receipt that showed he had stopped at a gas station the day Sarah disappeared. Now, this gas station was in town. It was not where he claimed he was that day, so with that, they knew he lied about his alibi. Now, this receipt was still not enough to charge Roy, so they had to release him again, and in the meantime, they continued looking for evidence to connect him to Sarah's abduction, and they continued searching for Sarah. Everyone just hoped that she would be found alive and that she would be returned safely to her family. But unfortunately, just 17 days after Sarah's abduction, she was found, but not in the way that everyone had hoped. On July 17th, Sarah's body was found 12 to 15 miles away from where she disappeared. I won't go into the full details about the condition of her body because it is brutal. In the end, it was determined that she had been strangled and suffocated, and it's believed that she had also been essayed. Now, this was a murder investigation, and police knew that they needed to find evidence ASAP against Roy. They continued looking around, and they were able to get a search warrant for his van. Inside his van, they found a red sweatshirt which had a single strand of Sarah's hair. Not only that, but they also found 22 fibers from different items in his van that were found on the Velcro strap of Sarah's shoe. With this, he was arrested and charged with the abduction and murder of Sarah on February 6, 2001. In the end, he was found guilty and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. However, that was eventually reduced by 10 years, so he will be eligible for parole when he is 82 years old. To this day, he has never admitted to kidnapping or murdering Sarah, so we don't actually know how this happened. We don't know how Sarah got into the van, if he forced her in the van, if he lured her in. We really don't know the details of what happened that day. It's truly frightening how quickly Sarah was abducted. I mean, it just happened right there in front of her brother in a matter of seconds. Sarah's family is just so upset that they had no idea Roy lived in the area because at the time, the sex offender registry was not open to the public. So since then, they have fought to pass Sarah's law. What happened to Sarah is just absolutely heartbreaking, and my heart goes out to her family.
Here's some horror movies that everybody seems to like, and I just simply do not. I've tried to like them. I've tried multiple times with some of these, starting out first up with The Tunnel, and this is actually the movie that inspired me to make this list because I just gave this movie a second shot because I'm like, I must be missing something. Everybody seems to fucking love it. It's gotta be me. I still didn't like it. I wanted to love it. I did. This is one where I truly don't think I've ever seen anybody say anything bad about this movie. I've only seen good things. I've only seen people say that it's scary. I didn't fucking like it at all. This one was just an absolute snooze fest for me. Could not get into it. The same goes for a lot of found footage movies that I usually see on the same list as The Tunnel. And I should have known based off my Lake Mungo experience, because that's another one everybody was hyping it. I literally watched Lake Mungo 3 times to see if there was something wrong with me, and I fucking hated it every time. Another one that I always see people talk about that I just found very underwhelming was Butterfly Kisses. Again, same thing as The Tunnel. I feel like both of the plots mix into one for me. I have not given this one a second shot, but on my first time, I simply was just not impressed. And rounding out that found footage category, another one I often see on lists with those two is The Borderlands. I think this one is also known as The Last Prayer or The Final Prayer in other countries. This one was fine. It was probably my favorite of the 3 that I've just mentioned, but I still did not really like it. And people like praise this movie and say it's so great. I just could not get into it. Now, this movie, quite frankly, I fucking hate. Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer. I feel like this is another one I've never heard anybody say anything bad about this movie. I can't fucking stand it. I think this movie is so boring and so drawn out. I know it's a classic. I respect it. It's just not for me. Speaking of classics that I still do respect, I really just very much dislike Rosemary's Baby. Don't like it. Just don't like it. I don't think it held up. There's maybe like 2 good scenes, and otherwise it's an incredibly drawn out 2.5 hour long movie. I really loved the first Horror in the High Desert, but I really disliked the sequels. In fact, I fucking hated the third one. And I feel like I see so many people who love the series as a whole. Like, they love the second and the third one, and I just don't fucking get it. I wish it kept the momentum that the first one did. Otherwise, I would have loved these 2, but they did not do it for me. Caveat, this one came out on Shudder probably a couple years ago at this point, and I remember everybody hyping it up about how scary it was. And of course, I'm already skeptical when people hype things up to be like the scariest movie of the year or whatever, but this one was just really underwhelming. It was okay. I didn't hate it. It wasn't bad. It was just there, and it's kind of unmemorable to me. I talk about this one all the time and how I dislike it. I do not like Hereditary. I do not like Midsommar either. If I had to pick one over the other, I would pick Hereditary, but I still just simply don't fucking like this movie. I do not think it is nearly as scary as everybody was hyping it up to be, which I don't think a movie has to be scary to be good, so that's fine, but just the plot itself I thought was way too convoluted. And for me, the only redeeming quality in this movie and what would make me watch it again is the performances, specifically Toni Collette's. Unfriended Dark Web. I just rewatched this one for my podcast. I am a huge lover of the first Unfriended movie, and I usually see people saying that they like this one better. Like, I more often see people saying that they like this one as opposed to the original, and I just don't fucking see it. I do not think this movie's great. The characters are very unlikable to me. It's fine, but I don't understand it when people say they like this one better than the first one. Finally, I have House of the Devil by Ty West. I kind of go back and forth with this movie, and it's not that I don't like it, because there are elements of it that I do like. Like, I think it's, like, visually beautiful to look at, but in reality, like, the storyline is mostly just her walking around this fucking house. Like, I get it's a slow burn, but this one is, like, too much of a slow burn for me. I just couldn't get into it. And that's it. If you like any of these movies, that is totally fucking fine, because you are entitled to your opinion, and I still respect you. Love you, bye.
Top fish suppliers in Asia,
Yeah?
you're actually supporting one of the biggest cults ever in the world, the Moonies. You ever hear about the Moonies?
No, what the heck?
This is dead ass the biggest cult that's ever been created. Now, the Moonies is started in Korea, and it's founded by this guy.
Let me see. In Korea, eh?
Founded by this guy. So his name is Sun Myung-yoon. Sun Myung-moon. Sun Myung-moon.
Why do you always say Chinese names like that?
I'm trying to say it accurately.
Yeah.
Sun Myung-moon. Why do you have to say that? No, that's how you say his name.
I guess.
Okay, but anyways, so similar to the cult I was talking about in the old episode, in the last episode, everybody thinks this guy is their messiah, and his story's interesting.
Yeah.
So his story, he claims that he went to this hill and Jesus was there and pretty much told him, and this is why I think it's wrong, because he said that Jesus told him that Jesus failed. That's what he said. And that he has to continue his mission for him. Yeah. This is what's wild though. Because they had so many members of the Moonies, especially in the 70s to 80s. And I think it's still active to this day. Okay. That's why it's a little bit like, if you like, I'm not saying no disrespect or nothing. It's just like, we just have to talk about it, right? But look, Moonies, this active member, like, look. Okay, let me see. How many? Over 3 million members of the Moonies, fam. Unification Church.
Okay, that's a cult, fam. That's insane.
That's a big cult. Now, they were able to make such a big impact in Korea. They brought it to America.
Oh,
yeah.
shit.
And they had huge events. It was pretty much like a Travis Scott concert, bro.
So when we talk about disturbing movies, 2 movies usually come up in conversation as the most disturbing movies ever made. A Serbian film is one, and the other is Trauma. So if you haven't seen this movie yet, and you don't want it to be spoiled, scroll on, because I'm going to break this movie down for you right now. So released in 2017, Trauma was directed by Lucio A. Rojas. So Trauma is a quite brutal Chilean horror movie that combines elements of extreme cinema, psychological horror, as well as social commentary. So Trauma has been compared to exploration films from the 1970s. Films known for, their relentless depiction of human depravity, I guess. So the film begins with a really nasty prologue set in 1978. A young boy called Juan has been forced to watch his mother be SA'd, as well as a bunch of other real awful things happening to her. And the people carrying out these atrocities towards her are military officers. One thing leads to another, and Juan himself is forced to repeat, shall we say, some of the actions of these military officers, specifically when it comes to the SA portion of it. It's really quite nasty to watch. Yeah. So we then fast forward to the present day. 4 women are on vacation in this remote part of Chile. However, their trip turns into a pure nightmare when they run into Juan as an adult and his son. And it seems that the awful things that Juan experienced when he was younger has turned him into an actual monster. Like, he is a vicious, depraved, nasty person in this film. And these 4 women are now the targets of Juan and his son's sadistic torment, which involves both mental, physical, and SA attacks on them. Nothing that we see these women go through is shied away from. We see everything, and it's extremely difficult to watch because it is so graphic. And the actors who play these roles have done an excellent job at portraying some of the most awful emotions one must go through when experiencing these things. I mentioned before that people compared Trauma to a Serbian film. Many of you might know that I really don't like a Serbian film. Sure, it's a disturbing film, but I don't think it's a very good film. Trauma, on the other hand, while it's not a perfect film, I prefer it to a Serbian film because of the acting itself. And the most brutal scenes within this movie are made hyper-realistic because of the acting. So throughout the rest of the movie, it is just an onslaught of really nasty things happening towards these women, but they are now caught in this kind of cat and mouse game where they're trying to get away from these people, and every single time they try and get away, they somehow manage to land right back in their laps. The disturbing things that happen in this movie are some of the most heinous things you can imagine happening to a person. So Juan is now an adult, and he embodies the very same violence that was inflicted upon him. So his entire life is revolved around him and his son going around and subjecting women to really heinous acts. Joan's character isn't just an individual monster, he is symbolic of the dictatorship in Chile. So in that sense, Trauma is doing something, I think, different to a Serbian film. The characters have more depth and they mean something other than what we are watching. This is a really disturbing film, and it doesn't shy away from showing us the absolute pinnacle of how sadistic Joan and his son now are. I think one of the most disturbing parts within this entire film is within the first kind of half an hour, when the four women are first face to face with Joan and his son, and they are subjected to very, very extreme behavior towards them. And this scene kind of reflects the opening prologue of the movie, where Joan is forced to watch his mum go through really, really awful circumstances. I'm trying to be really cryptic because I can't say a lot of the things that happen in this movie. I just hope that you understand that what I mean is what I mean. Do you know what I mean? Fuck. So in the scene where Joan and his son are with the women in the cabin, whilst they are terrorizing them, they are forcing the others to watch. So this kind of mirrors what happens to Joan when he was a kid. Some of the women don't make it out of that initial encounter with the two men. The remaining survivors, they do manage to escape, but they always manage to be recaptured by them, and that's what's quite frustrating about this film. We think that their horror is over, but they keep returning to the horror, and these two are really awful. I can't explain to you how depraved this movie goes on here. I keep saying that. So by the end of the movie, there is only one woman remaining, and her and Joan have this really brutal fight towards the end, which ultimately leads to her unaliving Joan. For me, I think one of the most disturbing aspects of this film is Joan's son. He has essentially been raised by Joan, groomed into being this awful, nasty human, and he doesn't know any better because his dad is so depraved. It's all he knows. With regards to the son, the ending is quite ambiguous, and I think that the movie is trying to say us that this cycle of violence will probably continue even though Joan is no more. I think that this is a film about trauma, but specifically political trauma. This is a very political film, and you know, trauma is right there in the title. But it is also about, you know, personal trauma. So Joan is experiencing extreme trauma due to the things he was subjected to when he was a kid. But I think that the movie represents, you know, political trauma, the trauma that Chile must be feeling from years of dictatorship. Also a film about cycles of abuse, obviously, and how it can be perpetuated from one generation to the next generation. And it's also a movie about power, you know, power struggles between men and women, power struggles between fathers and their sons. So overall, Trauma is a better film than a Serbian film. I think it is not quite as disturbing. I think there are things that happen in this movie that are very, very stomach-churning for sure. Specifically the opening scene, specifically the scene in the cabin. There is one scene in a Serbian film that I think would probably be more disturbing than anything in this movie, but I think Trauma is a much better film. I think it looks better, it's acted better, it's got a better score, but it also means something else. Whereas I get the impression that a Serbian film has just been made for shock value, and I know that a lot of people, you know, pop into my comments and say that it is a film about censorship within Serbia, but I didn't get that when I watched it. Now, when you watch Trauma, you understand a lot more that they are trying to say something else with the story, and I appreciate that. I know that this video was a bit rambly. I don't write scripts for any of my videos, but for some reason this one was a bit rambly. Anyway, that was my breakdown for Trauma. Let me know in the comments what film you want me to spoil next, and I'll try my best to spoil it for you. See you later.
Why did evil people like this exist? During the 1920s, there was a man named Philip D. Cupp who owned a hot air balloon business based in Miami, Florida. Over the years, his business was highly successful, taking customers over the ocean to sightsee. But by the year 1925, disappearances in the area increased almost 500%, and the authorities were baffled. During the investigation, a local boater witnessed a man fall from a hot air balloon. But by the time he got to the man, it was too late, and the balloon was already heading back to shore. Philip was later questioned by the authorities, but he stated that he hasn't done any rides today, and it was probably one of the other hot air balloon companies. It was later discovered he was the only one in the area who owned a hot air balloon, so the authorities booked a solo ride for an undercover officer named Joffrey to look into him further. Everything went as planned, and Joffrey went up into the sky in the balloon. All was normal until Philip randomly said, "What goes up must go down." And when Joffrey turned back and looked at Philip, he was charging towards him, and a scuffle proceeded. The authorities below watched as the balloon moved around erratically and eventually crashed into the waters below. Neither of the men made it, and it was later discovered that Philip was responsible for over 400 disappearances in the Miami area.
This happened in Michoacan, Mexico. So this guy says that growing up, him and his older brother had to share a room. He says that they had a habit of always staying up till like 11 at night on their phones. He admits that every time he would see his older brother put his phone away, he did too, because he was so scared of laying in the room while his brother was asleep and him on his phone, like surrounded by darkness. He does say that he grew out of that fear of like his brother being asleep and him staying up. So after a few years, he did end up staying up on his phone till like 3 or 4 in the morning. He says that even though he would stay up till 3 or 4 in the morning, sometimes he would get a little bit panicked because we all know that not good things happen around that time. He does say that from time to time his fear would get the best of him, so he would end up putting music on his phone and falling asleep to that. He also admits that there were times where he would remind himself that he was alone, awake, everyone's asleep, total darkness, so he would literally put the blanket over his head and continue to watch videos even though his eyes would get red from how tired he was. He almost saw it like a challenge. He wanted to stay awake and like face his fear. So when he was around 7 years old, he says that he stayed up on his phone again, but this time he saw something weird through his window. He says that he kept seeing something like flying back and forth. That he did have a curtain on his window. It was like dark and brown, but at nighttime, since it was much lighter outside, you can see when something darker would pass by, which is how he would see that thing just flying back and forth. He said that at first he wanted to tell himself that maybe there were birds, but the way that he would see it flying back and forth, like it didn't seem like a bird. And also he said that he would almost also see them land on the roof of the house, and when he would try to take a peek, there would be nothing on the roof. He also told himself, like, what if I'm seeing these things because of how late I'm staying up, because he would get tired and he wouldn't go to sleep. But he says that he doesn't think it was him, because there was a time where he actually just removed the whole curtain because he wanted to see what the fuck was flying back and forth, and nothing would fly by and there was nothing on the roof. He doesn't know how he grew the courage to do this, but one of those nights he had a plan. He literally opened the curtain to the point where only one eye was outside and one eye was inside the room, and he stayed there for a good amount of time and nothing passed by. And as soon as he quit, he saw something fly back and forth again. He thought to himself, like, what if they are witches? Like, what if they're messing with me? And of course they would mess with me because I'm 7 years old, and what if they want to take me away? He says that after a while, like whatever it was flying back and forth just became his new norm, and he really didn't worry about it anymore. That was until one night where he was laying in bed on his phone and he heard the craziest animal sounds coming from his dogs and chickens outside. And a few moments after hearing all that, he started to hear something coming from his window. Something that sounded like somebody was in pain, getting closer and closer. He got scared, but immediately opened up that curtain and looked to see what was outside, and again, there was nothing. And even though he didn't see anything outside of his window, his dogs and chickens were still going crazy. In that moment, he was so scared that he decided to pick his phone up and look up a video of like prayers and just let it play throughout the night. He said that in his crazy moment, he picked one and didn't really think about it, and when it started playing, the actual prayer was in Latin, so he didn't really understand what they were saying. He got a little freaked out, but then the priest in the video started talking normal and he understood him, but then the priest would go back into talking talking into that Latin language and almost like screaming it. So he was like, what the fuck is going on? He said that he was so scared that he didn't even have the energy to like get up, get his phone, change it to something different because he just couldn't move. And in that moment is when someone on the other end of that room called his name. It was his brother, of course, who had woken up by the sound of that Latin prayer that the priest was screaming. His brother told him to shut that off because instead of sounding like a prayer, it sounded like something satanic and he needed to turn that shit off now. He scared his brother, and of course he understood how scary it was, because imagine being in deep sleep and you get woken up by a priest screaming something in Latin. I would have had a heart attack. So he shuts it off and tries to go to sleep, even though he continues to see something pass by and hear that weird sound of that thing that was getting closer to his window. The next day, his brother did tell his mom what happened that night. His mom didn't get mad at him, but she did ask why he was trying to play a prayer in the middle of the night. All he told her was that it was because he couldn't go to sleep. He admits that he couldn't tell his mom what he was seeing through the window. It wasn't until years later where this conversation came up in his family, and that's when he finally admitted to them what he would see at his window. He said his family didn't have this like crazy reaction because they thought the same thing he did when he first saw it, which was that they could have been animals. So again, this was only a few years later, which meant that they were now teenagers and still were in that same room. The family still lived in that same house. So because his family didn't have that big reaction, he was like, I'm gonna prove it to them that this is not an animal. So he decided that that night when he would see that thing in the window, because he was still seeing it, he was gonna wake his brother up and make him watch with him. Unfortunately, his brother saw nothing and neither did he. Apparently, he believed that that thing would only appear when it was him alone and not when anyone else was watching. And that was the case, because when his brother did fall asleep, he ended up seeing that thing fly back and forth on his window. He also attempted to record what was passing by with his phone, but he says that it was so dark that his phone couldn't even make out the things he was seeing with his own eyes. He says that every night that he goes to sleep and he sees those things, he remembers that time where something was like weeping by his window, getting closer and closer. He says that today he's still living in that house, and fortunately, he hasn't seen anything, but he knows that eventually they're just gonna come back and he's gonna see these things again. He says that as he's typing this story, he is laying in his bed in the middle of the night and he is terrified that he might see them again, and also terrified that they may do something more than just fly through his window. He says he's gonna put his phone away and attempt to go to sleep, and hopes that these witches or whatever it is outside his window will eventually leave him alone. This story comes from Relatos Oscuros, and if you want to listen to it, this is what the video will look like.